No one applauded when the priest declared them husband and wife. The cathedral had been filled with nearly 400 guests, yet silence settled over the room like fresh snow covering a battlefield. Even the candles seemed afraid to flicker. Evelyn Moretti stood frozen beneath the stained glass ceiling, her fingers trembling around a bouquet of white roses she no longer remembered holding. Across from her stood the man every newspaper called a billionaire entrepreneur. Every politician secretly feared him. Every criminal whispered his name. Damian De Luca. 6'4", black tailored suit, dark hair brushed perfectly back, eyes so cold they looked carved from polished obsidian. He hadn't smiled once during the ceremony, not when she walked down the aisle, not when she placed her hand in his, not even when the priest pronounced them husband and wife. His expression had never changed. It wasn't indifference. It was discipline, the kind forged by men who had spent their lives deciding who lived and who disappeared forever. Outside, thunder rolled over Manhattan. Then came another sound. Not thunder. Engines. Hundreds of them. The cathedral doors burst open. Dozens of black SUVs flooded the street. Armed bodyguards stepped into formation with military precision. Guests exchanged terrified glances. One whispered quietly, "They're preparing for war." Damian never looked toward the doors. He already knew. He simply reached for Evelyn's trembling hand. For one impossible second, his thumb brushed against her skin. Warm, steady, protective. Then he let go, as though touching her had been a mistake. The reception took place inside the De Luca estate, overlooking the Hudson River. Crystal chandeliers illuminated marble floors imported from Italy. A string quartet played music no one listened to. Champagne flowed untouched. Every table was occupied by men whose suits cost more than luxury cars. Every one of them carried concealed weapons. No laughter, no dancing, only whispers. They forced him. No, they forced her. Did Lorenzo Moretti finally surrender? "I heard this marriage ends the war." Another voice answered quietly. "Nothing ends tonight." Evelyn heard every word. She wanted to ask questions. Instead, she stood beside her husband like another decoration inside the enormous ballroom. Beautiful, silent, confused. She barely knew Damian. 3 weeks earlier, she'd been restoring Renaissance paintings at the Metropolitan Museum. Now she wore diamonds worth more than entire apartment buildings. Nothing about her life felt real. Only one thing did. The way every person in the room watched Damian. Fear had a language. She was beginning to understand it. An elderly woman approached. Silver hair, elegant black dress, eyes filled with something resembling pity. "Poor child." Evelyn frowned. "I'm sorry." The woman hesitated, then quietly squeezed her hand. "Some marriages begin with love." She looked toward Damian. "Others begin with sacrifice." Before Evelyn could ask another question, the woman disappeared into the crowd. Across the ballroom, Damian was already watching. Not jealous, not suspicious, calculating. His head of security approached. Marco Romano, former Marine, scar running across his jaw. "Boss." Damian never looked away from Evelyn. "Report. We found 2 unfamiliar shooters on neighboring rooftops, and they're dead." Damian nodded once. "Good." Marco lowered his voice. "They weren't after you." Damian's jaw tightened. almost imperceptibly. I know. They had photographs of Mrs. De Luca. Silence. The air seemed to freeze. Damian finally looked toward Marco. Double the perimeter. It's already done. Triple it. Marco didn't argue. He simply walked away. That alone told everyone nearby exactly how serious the situation had become. Evelyn never noticed. She was standing near one of the enormous windows overlooking the rain-soaked gardens. Someone stepped beside her. A young woman wearing emerald silk. Beautiful, confident, the type of woman magazines placed on their covers. I almost married him. Evelyn blinked. What? The woman smiled sadly. Damian. Evelyn looked toward her husband, across the ballroom. He never told you? No. Of course he didn't. The woman laughed softly. He never tells anyone anything. You loved him? The woman considered the question. I don't think Damian allows people to love him. And him? He doesn't belong to himself. She turned toward Evelyn. You'll understand that soon enough. Then she walked away, leaving behind more questions than answers. That night, the mansion became eerily quiet. Bodyguards occupied every hallway. Security cameras overlooked every entrance. Snipers watched the surrounding forests. It looked less like a home, more like a fortress, preparing for invasion. A maid guided Evelyn toward the master suite. She paused outside enormous oak doors. Mrs. De Luca. Yes? The older woman looked uncomfortable. The boss asked me to prepare another bedroom. Evelyn frowned. Another bedroom? Yes. Her heart tightened. Oh? The maid lowered her eyes. I'm sorry. The master bedroom overlooked the river. Rain streaked across floor-to-ceiling windows. A fire crackled quietly. Damian stood beside it, removing his cufflinks with calm precision. He didn't turn around. You can choose whichever room you like. Evelyn remained standing near the doorway. We're married. I know. You don't want me here? Silence stretched between them. Finally, he faced her. For the first time all day, their eyes truly met. There was no hatred inside his, no disgust, no desire, only exhaustion. You deserve honesty. She waited. I will never force you. I never thought you would. You misunderstand. His voice remained calm. I'm not saying I won't. Her breath caught. I'm saying. He stopped, as though choosing the next words carefully. I cannot. The room fell completely silent. She stared at him. What does that mean? It means exactly what I said. You married me. Yes. But you won't even share a room? No. Why? His eyes lingered on hers for several long seconds. Long enough for something almost human to appear beneath the ice. Fine. Then it vanished. If I touch you. His voice dropped. U.D. Evelyn laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was impossible. What? You heard me. That's insane. It is. So explain. I can't. Why not? Because explaining it would put you in even greater danger. She took a step closer. You honestly expect me to believe touching your wife would kill her? His expression never changed. No. I expect you to survive long enough to hate me. He walked toward the bedroom door. Before leaving, he stopped, without looking back. If anyone asks, they'll ask why we aren't together. Tell them it was my decision. It was. I know. You don't care what they think? I care what they do. He finally looked over his shoulder. and what they'll do to you. Then he disappeared into the hallway. The heavy door closed quietly behind him, leaving Evelyn completely alone. She barely slept, not because she was frightened, because nothing made sense. Why marry her? Why protect her? Why refuse her? Every answer only created more questions. Around 3 in the morning, she heard voices outside her room. One belonged to Marco. The other, Damian. We've searched every vehicle. They're inside the estate. We're certain. A pause. Then Damian spoke quietly. They'll come before sunrise. Marco inhaled sharply. You want us to evacuate Mrs. DeLuca? No, boss. If they know she's moving, they'll attack. Exactly. Another silence. Then the words that sent chills down Evelyn's spine. No matter what happens, Damian's voice became frighteningly calm. If she's bleeding, if she's breathing, if she's crying, if she's terrified, you protect her. Marco answered immediately. And you? A long pause. I'll become the monster they already believe I am. Evelyn pressed her ear closer to the door. Footsteps faded. The hallway became quiet again. She should have stayed inside. Instead, curiosity won. She opened the bedroom door. The corridor was empty. Downstairs, light spilled beneath the study doors. She quietly descended the marble staircase. Halfway down, she stopped. The study door stood slightly open. Inside, Damian wasn't alone. 5 mafia captains surrounded an enormous table covered with maps. One slammed his fist down. This marriage makes you weak. Another growled, kill the girl. End this tonight. The room fell silent. Damian slowly looked up. His expression was almost peaceful. Then he spoke. If anyone in this room ever says those words again, I won't bury what's left of you. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Even the oldest captains lowered their eyes. Then, a deafening explosion shattered every window in the mansion. Glass erupted through the hallway. The lights went black. Gunfire exploded outside. Screams echoed through the estate. Evelyn instinctively ducked before she hit the floor. Strong arms wrapped around her. For the very first time, Damian touched her. He pulled her beneath his body as bullets ripped through the staircase behind them. His heartbeat thundered against hers. One hand shielded the back of her head. The other gripped a pistol. His voice remained terrifyingly calm. Nobody. A gunshot. Touche. Another burst of automatic fire. My wife. The first thing Evelyn noticed wasn't the sound. It was the weight. Damian's body was covering hers completely. One arm shielded the back of her head. The other never stopped firing. Each shot was deliberate, measured, terrifyingly calm. The marble staircase around them exploded into clouds of white dust as bullets tore through stone columns that had stood for more than a century. The chandelier above the grand foyer shattered. Thousands of crystal fragments rained through the darkness like frozen stars. Someone screamed. Someone else never had the chance. Outside, engines roared. Black SUVs skidded across the circular driveway as DeLuca soldiers poured from every entrance. The estate had become a battlefield, yet Damian never looked away from Evelyn. Are you hurt? She stared at him. No, you'll stay behind me. What is happening? A bullet slammed into the staircase inches from her shoulder. Damian didn't even flinch. "They're early." That was all he said. Not who, not why, only, "They're early." As though he had expected this moment for years, Marco burst into the foyer, covered in blood. Not his own. They breached the east wing. Damian stood, pulling Evelyn up with him. "How many?" 30. Maybe more. "Romano?" Marco's expression darkened. "Their markings." The name meant nothing to Evelyn. The look on Damian's face meant everything. His eyes became colder, almost empty. "Seal the tunnels. They already know about them." Damian looked toward the shattered windows. "No, they know someone told them." Another explosion shook the mansion. Smoke poured through the corridors. The emergency generators flickered to life, bathing the halls in deep crimson light. It no longer looked like a home. It looked like hell. Damian turned toward Evelyn. "Listen carefully. I'm not leaving you. You aren't being asked. I don't even know what's happening. You don't need to. I deserve answers." For one brief second, something cracked behind his composed expression. "I know." His voice softened almost imperceptibly. "And if I give them to you, I lose you." Before she could respond, a bodyguard stumbled into the hallway. "Boss." His words ended in blood. A sniper's bullet pierced his chest from outside. He collapsed only a few feet away. Evelyn gasped. Damian didn't. His pistol fired once. Half a second later, a distant rooftop sniper fell into the darkness. Marco stared. "You saw him?" "I saw the reflection." Damian grabbed Evelyn's wrist. "Move." They ran through corridors, lined with priceless paintings, past servants, hiding behind overturned furniture, past guards carrying assault rifles, past walls scarred by gunfire. Every few seconds, Damian looked over his shoulder, not to protect himself, to make sure she was still there. She noticed. He didn't realize she had. They reached an enormous library. Floor-to-ceiling shelves stretched toward a painted ceiling. Damian pushed against an ancient fireplace. Stone groaned. The fireplace slowly rotated. A hidden passage. Evelyn froze. "You have a secret tunnel?" "We have 23. What kind of house has 23 secret tunnels?" "The kind expecting betrayal." They stepped into darkness. The stone door closed behind them. Immediately, the sounds of gunfire became distant. Only the echo of hurried footsteps remained. Emergency lights glowed along damp stone walls. Evelyn struggled to keep pace. Finally, she stopped. "I can't do this anymore." Damian stopped walking. "So don't." She looked at him in disbelief. "I married you 12 hours ago." "Yes." "I've been shot at." "Yes." "You keep saying I'll die if you touch me." "Yes." "And now I'm running through underground tunnels because apparently your mansion has secret passages." He nodded once. "Correct." Her eyes filled with frustrated tears. "Who are you?" Silence. Long enough for dripping water to echo around them. Finally he answered, "The wrong man." She laughed bitterly. "I don't even know if that's supposed to be poetic." "It isn't." "Then tell me the truth." "I can't." "You won't." "They're different." "No, Damian." She stepped closer. "They aren't." For the first time, she stood directly in front of him, so close she could see the faint scar beneath his jaw, the tiny cut near his eyebrow, the exhaustion hidden beneath impossible control. "You don't trust me." His eyes held hers. I trust you. Then why? His answer came so quietly she almost missed it. Because I don't trust fate. Before she could ask what that meant, a phone vibrated. Marco. He answered immediately. Boss. Static. We lost the west perimeter. Casualties? 21. Damian closed his eyes. Only for a second. Then, the guests? Evacuated. The staff? Safe. Evelyn? Marco paused. Still breathing. Damian exhaled. Almost imperceptibly. Only one word escaped him. Good. Evelyn heard it. She pretended she hadn't. The tunnel ended beneath an abandoned church, overlooking the river. Rain hammered the stained glass windows. Lightning illuminated broken pews. Dust floated through cold air. The church looked forgotten by time itself. Damian pushed open a wooden door. 3 armed guards immediately lowered their weapons. The boss. One hurried forward. The safe house is ready. Damian nodded. No. The guard looked confused. Sir, we stay here. Marco frowned. The church isn't secure. Damian glanced toward Evelyn. It doesn't have to be. Everyone fell silent. No one questioned him. But everyone understood. He wasn't choosing the safest location. He was choosing the least predictable one. An hour passed. The shooting finally stopped. Rain continued. Heavy. Relentless. Evelyn sat alone near the old altar, wrapped in a black coat someone had given her. Her wedding dress was torn. Mud stained the white silk. She barely recognized herself. The cathedral wedding from only hours earlier felt like another lifetime. Across the church, Damian stood speaking quietly with Marco. She couldn't hear everything, only fragments. Someone inside. The oath. They know. Before the anniversary, Marco's face hardened. You think Romano found it? Damian didn't answer. He didn't need to. A small voice interrupted. Mrs. De Luca? She turned. A little girl, maybe 7 years old, curly brown hair, holding a stuffed rabbit. Evelyn smiled softly. Hi. The girl looked toward Damian. Is he really the scary boss? Evelyn followed her gaze. He certainly looks like one. The child whispered. He bought my house. Evelyn blinked. What? My mommy couldn't pay for medicine. He bought the whole apartment building. So, nobody had to leave. The little girl smiled proudly. But he said not to tell anyone. Evelyn looked back toward Damian. The image didn't fit. Not at all. Lauter. The child fell asleep on a church bench. Damian quietly walked over. Without waking her, he carefully covered her with his own coat, then walked away. He never noticed Evelyn watching. She approached him. You hate children? He looked confused. What? Everyone says you're a monster. They're right. No. She nodded toward the sleeping girl. Monsters don't buy apartment buildings. He remained silent. They don't remember birthdays. His eyes narrowed slightly. They don't keep stuffed rabbits in safe houses. Still, silence. Finally, he said, You've been observing. I restore paintings. So, I notice cracks other people miss. Something flickered behind his eyes. Not amusement. Recognition. Another guard hurried inside. Boss. Damian immediately turned. What? We found this. He handed over a silver bullet. Damian's expression changed. Completely. His hand tightened around the metal. Marco swore under his breath. What? Evelyn asked. Neither man answered. She stepped closer. What is it? Damian looked down at the engraved symbol. A black raven. Its wings wrapped around a bleeding crown. His voice became almost emotionless. They weren't trying to kill me. I know. They were announcing something. What? He slowly closed his hand around the bullet. The war has officially begun. Hours later, the rain finally eased. The church grew quiet. Most guards rotated outside. Marco left to inspect another safe house. For the first time, Damian and Evelyn were alone. Neither spoke. Only the sound of rain dripping from broken stained glass remained. Finally, she broke the silence. Were you always like this? He looked toward the altar. No. What happened? I grew up. You make it sound painful. It was. She waited. You've never loved anyone? His answer came instantly. I have. Her heart tightened unexpectedly. What happened to her? His eyes met hers. I buried him. She frowned. Him? My father. Silence. He was the only person I ever loved. And after that, there wasn't room for anyone else. She believed him. That somehow hurt more. A cold wind swept through the church. Evelyn shivered. Without thinking, Damian removed his jacket. He stopped halfway. His hand froze in the air. His jaw tightened. Slowly, he lowered the jacket again. Instead, he walked across the church, picked up a wool blanket, placed it beside her, not on her. Beside her, never touching her, never even brushing her fingers. The distance between them couldn't have been more than 6 inches. It felt like miles. She whispered, You almost did. He stared into the storm outside. I know. You stopped. I had to. Why? His breathing became heavier. If you keep asking, I'll eventually answer. Then answer. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. Because every instinct I have is telling me to forget the oath. She froze. What oath? His eyes closed. For just one heartbeat. The one that's already cost me everything. Outside, hidden among the rain-soaked cemetery, surrounding the abandoned church, a lone figure watched through a sniper scope, not aiming at Damian, not at his guards, only at Evelyn. The man smiled, then quietly spoke into a satellite phone. They're exactly where the old man predicted. A raspy voice answered. Good. Does the boss suspect? He suspects everyone. And the girl? She still knows nothing. The old man laughed. Excellent. Then she's walking willingly toward the truth. A long silence followed. Finally came the order. Don't kill her. Not yet. First, make her believe Damian betrayed her. The call ended. The sniper disappeared into the fog, completely unnoticed. And inside the forgotten church, Evelyn had no idea that the most dangerous weapon in the coming Mafia war wouldn't be bullets. It would be the truth. The abandoned church remained silent long after dawn. Outside, fog rolled across the old cemetery, swallowing weathered headstones one by one, until even the iron gates disappeared into white nothingness. Inside, candles replaced electricity. The safe house felt less like a refuge, more like a confession waiting to happen. Evelyn hadn't slept. Neither had Damian. He stood near one of the broken, stained glass windows, overlooking the river, his silhouette motionless against the pale morning light. For hours, he hadn't moved, He hadn't eaten. He hadn't spoken. It was the first time she realized something unsettling. The most feared mafia boss in New York wasn't afraid of bullets. He was afraid of time. Every passing hour seemed to tighten something invisible around him. Marco returned shortly after sunrise. His normally controlled expression was gone. He looked exhausted. There were coordinated attacks. Damian didn't turn around. How many properties? 7. Casualties? 32. A pause. And Romano? Marco hesitated. He never appeared. Damian finally faced him. Then none of this was the real attack. Marco lowered his voice. We found something else. He placed an old leather folder onto a wooden table. No insignia. No names. Just faded, black leather, scarred by decades of use. Damian's face hardened instantly. Where? One of Lorenzo Moretti's abandoned warehouses. Evelyn looked up. My father? Neither man answered. Marco slowly opened the folder. Inside, yellowed photographs, old newspaper clippings, financial records, letters, and one photograph that made Damian stop breathing. It showed two young men standing shoulder to shoulder, laughing. One was unmistakably Damian's father. The other, Lorenzo Moretti, Evelyn's father. Friends, not enemies. Her heartbeat stumbled. No. She picked up the photograph. This can't be right. My father hated yours. Damian's voice was almost hollow. No. They built everything together. The room fell silent. Evelyn stared at the smiling faces frozen in time. The photograph couldn't be older than 30 years. There were no weapons, no expensive suits, just two young men covered in grease, standing beside the frame of a half-built warehouse. Friends, brothers, almost. What happened? She whispered. Marco answered before Damian could. Someone convinced them to become enemies. Damian immediately looked at him. Enough. Marco nodded. My mistake. But Evelyn wasn't letting it go. No. She stepped forward. Finish. Marco glanced at Damian. The boss remained silent. Finally, Marco spoke. Your fathers didn't build rival empires. They built one empire. Evelyn's world tilted. What? It was supposed to unite every Italian family on the East Coast. So why? Because someone betrayed them. Who? Nobody answered. Not because they didn't know. Because saying the name aloud seemed dangerous. Finally, Damian spoke. Vittorio Romano. The name echoed through the empty church. He convinced everyone Lorenzo murdered my father. Evelyn's eyes widened. But my father always said, I know what he said. His voice remained calm. He lied. She shook her head. No, my father wasn't perfect, but he wasn't a murderer. Damian looked at her for a long moment, then quietly said, I know. That single sentence shattered something inside her. You don't think he killed your father? I stopped believing that years ago. Then why marry me? He didn't answer. Instead, he picked up another document, an old contract. Its edges were brittle with age. At the bottom, two signatures, Salvatore De Luca, Lorenzo Moretti. Then beneath them, written in dark red ink, a third signature, unknown. Marco spoke quietly. Blood. Evelyn frowned. What? The third signature. It isn't ink. It's blood. Damian folded the contract immediately. We're done. No. Evelyn stepped between him and the table. I'm done being treated like a child. I agree. Then tell me everything. I can't. You keep saying that. His voice remained perfectly level. Because it's still true. She slammed both hands onto the table. I'm your wife. His eyes met hers. And that's exactly why. Before either could continue, a phone rang. Marco answered. His expression changed almost instantly. What? He listened, then looked toward Damian. The museum. Evelyn's heart skipped. What about it? Marco swallowed. They broke into your restoration studio. 40 minutes later, 3 black SUVs pulled into the underground parking garage beneath the Metropolitan Museum. Police officers filled the entrance. Crime scene tape stretched across marble columns. The moment Evelyn stepped out of the vehicle, she froze. Her studio had been destroyed. Centuries-old paintings slashed. Canvas scattered across the floor. Glass cases shattered. Every restoration she'd spent years working on, ruined. She covered her mouth. No, Damian never looked at the paintings. He looked at the walls, then the ceiling, then the broken security cameras. His instincts weren't searching for vandals. They were searching for a message. Marco walked beside him. No valuables missing. Damian nodded. They weren't stealing. No, they were searching. Evelyn slowly wandered through the wreckage. Something caught her eye. One painting remained untouched. A 17th century family portrait she'd been restoring for months. She frowned. Why leave only one? She approached carefully, then noticed. The canvas had been cut open from the back. Someone had hidden something inside. She reached into the tier, pulled out a small velvet pouch. What is this? Damian crossed the room in 3 long strides. Don't. Too late. She opened it. Inside, an antique silver key and a folded piece of paper. Only 6 handwritten words. Trust no one wearing black. She looked around. Every one of Damian's bodyguards wore black suits. Her stomach tightened. Slowly, she raised her eyes toward Damian. He wasn't looking at the note. He was looking at the handwriting. His face lost all color. You recognize it. He said nothing. You know who wrote this. Still, silence. She stepped closer. Tell me. His voice was barely audible. I buried the man who wrote it. Before she could respond, the fire alarm erupted throughout the museum. Sprinklers activated instantly. Visitors screamed. Police shouted evacuation orders. Marco reached for his weapon. Boss. Smoke. Not from fire. From smoke grenades. Gray clouds swallowed the gallery within seconds. Visibility vanished. Someone shouted, "Move." Gunfire erupted. Not random. Professional. Short bursts. Precisi. Bodyguards fell one after another. Damian grabbed Evelyn's hand, then stopped. His fingers froze less than an inch from hers. The oath. Instead, he seized the sleeve of her wedding dress. Stay behind me. Masked men emerged through the smoke. Not dozens, only 6, which made them even more dangerous. Professionals. The first attacker fired. Damian pushed Evelyn behind a marble column. Bullets exploded against stone. He returned fire without hesitation. 1, 2, 3. 3 men dropped. The remaining attackers split apart with military precision. One wasn't aiming at Damian. He was aiming at Evelyn. Time slowed. Damian saw it. Too far. Too late. The rifle fired. Without thinking, Damian threw himself between them. The bullet struck him high in the shoulder. Blood splashed across Evelyn's white wedding dress. He never cried out. Instead, he kept shooting. The final attacker collapsed. Silence returned. Only the fire alarms remained. Evelyn stared at him. Blood poured through his suit. You've been shot. It's nothing. It went through your shoulder. I've had worse. He staggered once. Just once. Then regained his balance. She caught his arm instinctively. The moment their skin touched, Damian jerked backward, as though burned. Not because of pain, because of fear. Real fear. She had never seen it before. He looked at her hand, touching his wrist, then immediately pulled away. Evelyn. His voice had changed. You can't. What? You can't touch me. She stared in disbelief. You just took a bullet for me. I know. And you're worried? Because I touched your arm? His breathing became uneven. You don't understand. No. She shouted. I don't. Tears filled her eyes. You keep risking your life. You won't let me help you. You won't tell me why. You won't even let me touch you after you saved mine. The museum fell completely silent. Even Marco looked away. Damian stood motionless. Blood continued dripping onto the marble floor. Finally, he spoke. Not to Marco. Not to the guards. Only to her. If I ever stop protecting you, I can survive. His voice cracked for the first time. But if I ever stop resisting you, I lose everything. She couldn't understand. But something inside her changed. For the first time, she no longer believed he was rejecting her. He was fighting himself. Hours later, the bullet had been removed in a private, underground medical clinic owned by the DeLuca family. Damian refused anesthesia, refused painkillers, refused rest. The doctor finished stitching the wound. You'll reopen it if you keep moving. Damian buttoned his shirt. I know. You lost a lot of blood. I know. You should stay overnight. No. The doctor sighed. At least, let your wife stay with you. Damian looked toward the hallway where Evelyn waited. His expression softened so subtly that only the doctor noticed. No. Why? Because she'll stay. The doctor frowned. And you? I won't. Outside the clinic, rain had begun again. Evelyn watched Damian climb into another black SUV. She opened the passenger door. I'm coming. No. You've been shot. I'm working. I don't care. I do. She refused to move. So make me leave. The bodyguards exchanged nervous glances. Nobody had ever spoken to Damian DeLuca that way. He looked at her for a very long time, then quietly said, If you stay beside me tonight, they'll know. Who? The people waiting for me to fail. I don't understand. You will. His eyes lingered on hers, longer than ever before. I just pray it won't be too late. The SUV doors closed. The convoy disappeared into the rain, leaving Evelyn standing alone beneath the gray New York sky. Across the street, hidden behind the window of an abandoned bookstore, an elderly man watched the convoy disappear. He smiled faintly, then opened an ancient leather journal. Inside were hundreds of names. Most had already been crossed out. Only 2 remained untouched. Damian DeLuca, Evelyn Moretti DeLuca. The old man dipped his pen into black ink. and slowly wrote a single date beside their names. Day 14 of 365. Then he whispered to himself, "The oath is holding, but not for much longer." The rain never seemed to leave New York. It drummed against the windows of the safe house, as though the city itself was counting down to something inevitable. Evelyn stood alone in the candlelit library, staring at the silver key resting in the palm of her hand. The tiny piece of metal had already cost lives. Someone had hidden it inside a priceless painting. Someone had wanted her to find it, and someone else was willing to kill for it. Behind her, the heavy wooden door opened. Marco stepped inside. "The boss wants you moved." She didn't turn. "Where is he?" He didn't say. He never says. Marco gave a tired smile. "No, he never does." She finally faced him. "Is he all right?" Marco hesitated. "He'll survive." "That's not what I asked." "No." He looked toward the rain-covered windows. "It isn't." Damian hadn't slept in nearly 48 hours. The bullet wound across his shoulder had reopened twice. He ignored it. Instead, he stood inside an abandoned shipyard on the Hudson River, where rusted cargo cranes towered above rows of silent shipping containers. His most trusted captains surrounded a steel table. Maps, photographs, phone records, Banktransfers. Everything pointed toward the same conclusion. The attacks were never meant to destroy the DeLuca organization. They were designed to force Evelyn into discovering the truth. Marco arrived moments later. "They're moving her tonight." Damian nodded once. "As expected." "You think they'll come after the key?" "They already have." Marco lowered his voice. "Should we tell her what it opens?" For the first time all night, Damian looked uncertain. "If she knows now, they'll know she knows." Hours later, Evelyn's convoy left the church under heavy security. 3 armored SUVs, 2 escort vehicles, a police helicopter circling overhead. Yet, the streets felt strangely empty, almost staged. As they crossed the Manhattan Bridge, Evelyn noticed something. No traffic, no pedestrians, no taxis, nothing. She leaned toward the window. "This isn't normal." The driver spoke into his radio. "Boss," Static answered. Then, a truck jackknifed across the bridge. The convoy stopped instantly. Explosions echoed behind them. The rear escort vehicle flipped onto its side. Smoke swallowed the bridge. Marco's voice erupted through the radio. Ambush. Masked attackers poured from abandoned maintenance tunnels. Not dozens. A handful. Disciplined. Coordinated. Their objective wasn't chaos. It was precision. The lead attacker ignored the guards, ignored the armored SUVs. He ran straight toward Evelyn's vehicle. Marco fired first. The attacker disappeared behind concrete barriers. Bullets ricocheted across steel beams. The windshield cracked. The driver shouted, "Stay down." Evelyn ducked as another burst shattered the side windows. For one terrifying second, she thought Damian had been right. This had never been about him. It had always been about her. A black motorcycle burst through the smoke. Then another. The riders wore no insignia, only dark rain jackets. One skidded sideways, stopping beside Evelyn's SUV. The rider removed his helmet. Damian. Blood had soaked through the fresh bandages beneath his suit. He shouldn't have been there. He should have been recovering. Instead, He opened the passenger door. Come with me. You were told to rest. I changed my mind. She almost laughed despite the gunfire. You always do. Another explosion shook the bridge. Damian looked directly into her eyes. This time, I need you to trust me. Without another word. She climbed onto the back of the motorcycle. She hesitated only briefly before gripping the leather straps attached to the seat instead of wrapping her arms around him. He noticed. Neither of them said anything. The motorcycle accelerated into the smoke. They abandoned the bike beneath an old freight terminal near the waterfront. Inside, silence replaced gunfire. Rows of forgotten warehouses stretched into darkness. Damian finally stopped. His breathing was uneven. The wound had reopened again. Blood stained the side of his shirt. Evelyn stepped closer. You need stitches. I need 5 minutes. You need a hospital. I can't go. Because they'll find you? He shook his head. Because they'll find you. She stared at him. You keep saying everything is about protecting me. It is. Then stop treating me like I'm made of glass. For a long moment, he said nothing. Finally, he reached into his coat. Not for a weapon. For a folded photograph. He handed it to her. She unfolded it carefully. It showed 2 children. A little boy, a little girl, standing beneath an enormous oak tree. The little boy held the girl's hand. They couldn't have been older than 6. She frowned. Who are they? You. Her eyes widened. And me. The world seemed to stop. No. He nodded. You don't remember. I've never met you before this wedding. You did. When? The summer before my father died. He looked toward the river. Our families weren't enemies yet. You used to visit our estate. She stared at the faded picture. I don't remember any of this. You were too young. You saved me from falling into the lake. You cried because you thought your doll had drowned. A strange ache settled inside her chest. Fragments, tiny flashes, a boy's laughter, sunlight through leaves, a wooden dock. Nothing complete, only feelings. You've carried this photograph for 21 years. She looked back at him. Why didn't you tell me? Because memories make people careless. And secrets don't? His shoulders sagged slightly. No, they make people lonely. Before either could speak again, the sound of footsteps echoed through the warehouse. Not running, walking. Slowly, an elderly man emerged from the shadows, carrying nothing but a cane. Perfect gray suit, silver hair, calm eyes. He smiled as though greeting old friends. Evelyn. She instinctively stepped back. You know my name. I knew your mother. Damian's expression became unreadable. Vittorio. The old man nodded politely. Damian, you've grown into your father's eyes. The atmosphere changed instantly. No shouting, no weapons raised, just silence. The kind that existed before disasters. Vittorio glanced toward Evelyn. I imagine he's told you very little. He told me enough. I'm afraid he hasn't. The old man reached into his pocket. Slowly, carefully, he removed another photograph. This one newer. It showed Evelyn's father standing beside Damian's father, laughing. Exactly like the picture from the church. Vittorio sighed. They were brothers in everything but blood. Then who destroyed them? Evelyn asked. He looked directly at her. Fear. Damian's voice hardened. Don't. I'm merely telling the truth. The truth is your favorite weapon. Vittorio smiled sadly. No. Silence was. He turned back to Evelyn. Your fathers discovered that dozens of criminal organizations had infiltrated legitimate businesses, unions, charities, and even city government. They planned to expose everything to dismantle what they had helped create. They wanted out, Evelyn whispered. Yes, but leaving a violent empire is rarely permitted. She looked at Damian. So this war started because two men wanted to end it? He nodded once. They paid for it. And now? Now someone wants history to repeat itself. Police sirens echoed outside, growing louder. Vittorio looked toward the warehouse entrance. My time is over. He placed a small envelope on a nearby crate. No tricks, no bombs, only the truth. He turned to leave. Damian never reached for his gun. Instead, he said quietly, if she dies, it ends with me. Vittorio stopped walking. Without turning around, he answered, I know. Then he disappeared into the rain. Evelyn picked up the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter, not addressed to Damian, to her. The signature at the bottom made her knees weaken. Lorenzo Moretti. Her father's handwriting. Her father had written the letter years before his death. She began reading aloud. If you're reading this, then I failed. I wanted you to grow up far away from the violence I helped create. If Damian is beside you, trust his heart before you trust his silence. He carries burdens. I prayed you would never have to understand. A tear slipped down her cheek. The final line was written more shakily than the rest. Break the cycle. Don't inherit it. She lowered the letter. The silence between her and Damian felt different now. Not empty. Honest. She stepped toward him. You've been trying to keep me alive. Not inside this world. He nodded. I wanted you to have a choice. And you? A faint smile crossed his face. I lost mine a long time ago. She looked directly into his eyes. No. You still have one. Outside, the rain finally began to ease. For the first time since their wedding, the storm over the harbor started to break. But both of them knew the hardest battle was no longer surviving their enemies. It was deciding whether they would continue the legacy of violence or become the generation willing to end it. The rain had finally stopped. For the first time in days, sunlight reached the upper floors of the abandoned harbor warehouse, spilling across the dusty concrete in long golden lines. Everything felt unnaturally quiet, not peaceful. The kind of quiet that came after people realized there was nothing left to hide. Evelyn folded her father's letter with trembling hands. She looked at Damian. For days, she had searched for answers inside his silence. Now she understood that silence had never been cruelty. It had been protection. Not because he wanted to control her, because every secret he carried had made her a target. 48 hours later, the old federal courthouse overlooking Lower Manhattan had been closed for almost 20 years. Its grand courtroom, once filled with judges and juries, now stood empty. That was exactly why Damian had chosen it. Not for a negotiation, for an ending. Representatives from every surviving crime family had received the same message. Come unarmed, or don't come at all. Nobody trusted anyone, yet everyone came. Because after weeks of assassinations, betrayals, and fear, every family had lost someone. Violence was no longer profitable. It was consuming everyone. Evelyn stood on the courthouse balcony, overlooking the East River. Marco approached quietly. "You shouldn't be here." She smiled faintly. "I've heard that before. This time, I mean it." She looked through the courtroom doors. Damian stood alone beneath the enormous courthouse seal. No body armor, no visible weapon, just a dark charcoal suit. He looked less like a mafia boss and more like a man carrying the weight of 3 generations. "You've known him a long time." Marco nodded. "Since we were boys." "Has he always been willing to sacrifice himself?" Marco looked away. "No." He learned. Inside the courtroom, the final meeting began. No shouting, no threats, only exhausted faces. Some had buried sons, others brothers, some fathers. Damian looked at every person in the room before speaking. "My father believed power came from fear." A pause. He was wrong. Silence. Fear built our empires. It also destroyed our families. Nobody interrupted. Not because they agreed, because they knew he was right. An older crime boss slowly stood. "You expect us to simply walk away?" Damian answered calmly. "I expect you to decide whether your children deserve the same lives you inherited." Another man laughed bitterly. "There is no walking away. There never has been." Damian looked toward the courtroom windows. There wasn't. Until today. He placed several folders on the long oak table. Bank records, property deeds, evidence connecting shell companies, weapons trafficking, extortion networks, and decades of corruption. Everything that had kept the criminal empire alive. "I've already signed over every legitimate business owned by my organization." Murmurs spread across the room. The hospitals, the housing projects, the scholarship foundations. They're no longer ours. They belong to independent public trusts. Marco watched from the doorway. Even he hadn't known. Damian had spent years quietly separating legitimate community projects from criminal operations. Not to protect an empire. To make sure innocent people wouldn't lose homes, jobs, or medical care when the organization collapsed. One of the younger men frowned. "And the rest?" Damian's answer came without hesitation. "The rest ends today." The courtroom doors suddenly burst open. Federal agents flooded the hallway. Weapons drawn. Federal agents. Nobody move. The room erupted into chaos. Several men instinctively reached toward concealed weapons. Damian raised his voice. "No." Everyone froze. He slowly lifted both hands. "No more." On Bewan. Others followed. Pistols were placed on tables. Knives dropped onto the floor. Years of fear, ending in one impossible moment. Outside, Evelyn watched as handcuffed men were escorted into waiting vehicles. Some looked defeated. Others looked relieved. The cycle that had consumed their fathers was finally breaking. Not because one family had won, because no one had. Hours later, Damian sat alone in a federal interview room. Gray walls, metal table, one window overlooking the city. The door opened. An investigator entered, carrying a single folder. "You understand what happens next?" Damian nodded. "I do." "You've agreed to cooperate." "Yes." "You'll likely spend years under federal protection." "I know." "And Miss Moretti?" His eyes softened. "She has nothing to do with any of this." The investigator studied him. "You love her." Damian didn't answer. He didn't need to. Across the street, Evelyn waited beneath the courthouse steps. The afternoon sun reflected off the river. People hurried past without realizing history had quietly changed inside the building behind her. Marco joined her. He asked me to give you this. A small velvet box. She opened it. Inside lay the wedding ring Damian had placed on the table the night they married. Beneath it, a handwritten note. You deserved a marriage built on choice, not fear. If life gives us another beginning, I'd like to meet you as Damian, not as the man everyone feared. Tears blurred the ink. 1 year later, autumn arrived quietly. The small art restoration studio, overlooking Central Park, smelled of fresh paint and old books. Evelyn had rebuilt everything, not because forgetting was easy, because moving forward required courage. A bell chimed above the front door. She looked up automatically. A man stood in the doorway. Dark coat, shorter hair, a faint scar across his shoulder, visible above the collar. He looked healthier, older somehow, not because of age, because peace had finally reached him. Neither of them spoke. For several seconds, they simply looked at each other. Then, Damian smiled. It wasn't the practiced smile seen in photographs. It was small, awkward, real. I was told this is the best restoration studio in New York. She crossed her arms, pretending to study him. I've heard the owner is difficult. So I've heard. He stepped closer. There is something I'd like restored. She raised an eyebrow. What? My future. For the first time, she laughed. Not out of relief, out of hope. He reached into his pocket. Slowly, carefully, the same wedding ring. He didn't kneel. He didn't make a speech. He simply held it out. This time, if you say yes, it won't be because anyone forced us. Evelyn looked at the ring, then at the man holding it. The title that had once defined him no longer mattered. He wasn't standing there as the feared head of a criminal empire. He was simply Damian, a man who had chosen accountability over power, a man who had finally broken a cycle of violence instead of passing it to another generation. She slipped the ring onto her finger. Then, after a long pause, she closed the distance between them. All this time, no oath stopped them. No war stood between them. No secret demanded silence. She took his hand. He held hers gently. Neither rushed the moment. Outside, leaves drifted across the sidewalk as New York continued its endless rhythm, unaware that two lives had quietly found the freedom their parents had never been allowed to choose. And for the first time, their story wasn't about surviving the past. It was about finally having a future.